Hey, deserving listeners, it's the reunion and it's live on Netflix. Let's watch. So I actually pressed play on Netflix to play the live stream, and it is not working. And it's 45 minutes later. I've just been sitting here. So I thought since I'm all dressed up with no place to go, I thought I would just click on some other things that I might react to. This is an interview with Chelsea, so let's watch.
When you saw the conversation play out between Kwami and Micah, that very long conversation where you were waiting for your chips and guac and you never got it.
God bless. It's okay.
Oh man. How did you respond to that? Because you finally got to see how it played out, because you didn't really know how that conversation was.
I will say, I as much as I saw how it played out, I didn't, right? Like, I'm not in the lens of the camera.
Right, so they're asking about the pool scene in which Kwami and Micah were heavily flirting, probably alcohol-induced, at least to some extent, but very much flirting. And Kwami was facing away from her from the way it looked. And I think she's confirming that at the time, she wasn't happy, as she was saying on the show, but she didn't know what was actually happening between Kwami and Micah. It's a good question to start off with. Let's see what she says.
So I'm seeing it, but I'm not seeing the touching. I'm not seeing the look in their eyes. Like, I wasn't seeing that, you know? And I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah.
But it was difficult. It was difficult. You know, you have Jackie being like, I would behead him. I love my powerful Jackie B. I really do. And in that moment, I had to have like a Chelsea moment. Like, what are you gonna do, babe? This is the biggest moment ever.
For Chelsea, she's talking about what it was like. So she's saying, I just had to go to my moment. I think that means she has to, do some relaxation techniques, some mindfulness techniques or something, emotional regulation, which is apparent in her behavior because she handled herself very well. I mean, I can't imagine anyone handling it better, really. She was upset, as she says. It was difficult. And she, I think, was waiting for Kwami and Micah to separate so she could go over to Kwami and say, what's going on? And then it became too much and she just walked away, which I thought was a good move, because if she was to stay, it could create more difficulty, more distress, and might raise the likelihood of her losing focus and centering and actually going after them or engaging in it or something. So that's what she's talking about.
Biggest moment ever. And it's okay because I'm in an experiment where this is a part of the process.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that happened. It was wrong. It was.
Okay, so I think it's her way of framing it so it doesn't hurt as much. I think she's saying it's an experiment. Yeah, I wonder what she means by that, because it's not part of the experiment that you're supposed to emotionally cheat on your fiance. That's not part of the experiment. Unless she's saying it's a pretty odd circumstance and they make you interact with each other. Because, I think most people would prefer to just not see some of the people, or at least if Chelsea and Kwami were to talk, they'd be like, now that we're out of the pods, let's just leave that life behind us. Maybe we'll visit them in the future, but let's really focus on us. You could see them doing that, but the show forces them to have the pool scene and all that kind of stuff. I mean, force is a strong word, but I think it's something akin to that anyway. And so maybe that's what she's saying. It's like, look, you run the risk of having those sorts of things happen given the format of the experiment.
That happened. It was wrong. It was. But in the journey of trying to get married at the end, right? When you start dating 15 people, it's a human experience. You're gonna have connections with other people, right? There's tequila in Mexico.
Okay, yeah, you develop feelings for other people. That's part of the experiment. As a person that works in science, I have a hard time calling it an experiment. She's saying that, look, you bond. And I didn't really fall in love with anyone else or have a connection with anyone else in the pods except for Kwami, but he did. And that's normal. It's just part of the gig. And so when he developed a connection with Micah and then he saw her, it sparked that feeling. But overall, he wanted to be with me. Now, we don't know if they're still married. Hey, our shirt sort of matches. So yeah, we don't know if they're actually still together. I'm guessing they're not going to reveal that because that would be spoiling the reunion that is supposed to be playing. I'm watching this other screen and it's still saying there's an issue with the live stream. Hang tight. We're trying to fix it as soon as possible. I mean, we're now looking at an hour after it's supposed to air. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens here.
There's all the factors. And it was a big moment for me to be like, Chelsea, no, take a step back. I don't think if I had inserted myself, I don't think it would have gone well.
Yeah, good for her. I was so glad that she didn't. I thought for sure something like that was going to happen. And that's very mature, very differentiated, very taking the high road of her.
She was going to say, we can't think about all these things that were going to happen. I had no idea she was going to say something like that would trigger him like that, right? I really don't think there was a whole lot that Kwami and I could have done beforehand to really have like avoided getting upset at a comment like that. That was an in the moment comment and it angered him.
Yeah, I don't think you would want to avoid getting angry at what I think she's referring to, the toast that Micah gave. Here's to failed proposals. I don't know why you would want to avoid being upset about something that is inherently upsetting.
Right? And then with all the everything else going on, it led to, you know, them talking for longer and having that close conversation. That was the first time they've seen each other. Like, people just don't understand this experiment.
Now,
Good for her. So now I'm thinking they are together. I'm trying to figure out clues along those lines. She's defending him. She's saying, look, you don't understand. People on the outside, it might be simple to you that, yeah, Kwami is a big jerk face for flirting with Micah, but you don't understand. Like, he fell in love with two people, and a lot of people fell in love with or had a serious connection with multiple people. It's overwhelming, the experience. And then you meet both of the people you had a serious connection with, both Chelsea and Micah, in person, and the feelings don't go away. I mean, I think it's literally the next day or 2 days later, or I don't know how many days later it would have been from, you know, him breaking up or Micah breaking up with him, but, you know, at the probably no more than 5 days. So you have a major connection. And of course, a lot of people say, well, how could you have a major connection in that short of time? They clearly do. People literally get engaged and get married, as we have seen. So the process, the format of the show clearly facilitates that. And I've been over that already in terms of why that would be, because of the isolation and the intimacy of the talking and everything. So for Chelsea, she's pointing that out. And I have been always pointing that out as well, that it's intuitive to me that there would be that. It wouldn't be unusual for someone in Kwami's position to maybe have feelings for Micah for the rest of his life. Now, what do we do with those feelings, right? Do we fantasize? Do we cheat? What do we do? Feelings are feelings. Connection is connection. There are okay, for those of you who are in a good relationship, committed relationship, there are people that you had a major connection with, past partners, other sorts of people, who in your heart right now, you still have some feelings for, depending, but in all likelihood, you don't want to be with that person. You might not even want to talk to that person, but you have some feelings. And if you were forced to talk to that person and you had a few drinks, you might actually engage in some behavior kind of like Kwami and Micah in terms of what they did. I'm not saying it's right. In fact, it's not right. They were doing it right in front of their partners. And even if they weren't, it's infidelity. It's one thing to have the feelings. It's another thing to actively act on them and to, in a prolonged manner, because it was not just that one conversation, it was the other. So it is infidelity in my book. I mean, Chelsea can define it. I wonder if Chelsea is just super relaxed and confident in herself and above those kinds of issues, getting into it about those kinds of specifics. I mean, some people have attitudes, and we don't talk enough about this, but there are a lot of couples. So you have polyamorous couples that are open about having an open relationship, but there are monogamous couples, monogamously oriented individuals who just have a more lax attitude about infidelity. They don't love it. They're not seeking it. They don't like it. It's hurtful, but it doesn't surprise them that some things like that might happen some of the time. Or if she and Kwami had long conversations, Kwami could have reassured her up and down. Just be like, yeah, oh my God, I'm so sorry, but I had a connection with her, and I guess I just needed that closure or something. I don't know, but I'm totally in love with you. Maybe they've had those conversations.
I mean, you're giving a lot of grace, and you are such an evolved human to like have this understanding and to be really calm about it right now. But how do you view your relationship and connection with Kwami now that you've seen how his conversations were going with Micah.
I don't think I had realized like how like deeply they had connected. I never once talked about another woman in the pods, ever. I was actually pretty appalled at how much that was happening with other women. So what does she have that I don't?
Okay, so she's saying, I didn't realize that Kwami had that much of a connection. And that means that maybe she and Kwami hadn't had those conversations, that Kwami hadn't gone to her and said, look, when you see the show, you're going to see some stuff. So it sounds like maybe that didn't happen. And she's also saying that in the pods, she did not talk about the other women. And she's saying she's appalled that that did happen a number of times.
So what does she have? No, I was never like that. Also because you don't know what's going on in that pod. I could only know what's going on in my relationship, right? That was their relationship. I'm self-confident, self-aware. I needed to be sure in what we had going. I needed to focus on that. So I never ever talked about her with him, ever. And I think he respected that. I wasn't gonna come in there and, bash her. They had a connection and that.
Right. Actually, I didn't think of that. I don't know if this is what she's saying, but she could have bashed her pretty easily, right? She could have, because there was a time when Chelsea knew that, at least I think, that Kwami was both into Chelsea and Micah. And she, I think, knew what Micah was really like. In fact, we saw that scene where Chelsea is talking to Micah and Irina as a mom or a big sister and chastising them for the way they were acting.
Bash her. They had a connection and that was theirs.
Now, when you watched all of those interactions, now that the show is out, when you're sitting at home watching, do you get any type of tinge of uncomfortableness?
Of course I do.
Okay, all right.
It's very uncomfortable.
All right, thank you. Not that I wanted to get a rise out of you,
Come on.
but it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, okay, good question. This is a good interview. She, on E! News, is saying, okay, but does it affect you? And Chelsea's like, oh my God, yeah, it really affects me. So, all right.
As a married woman, it makes even friends of mine who are single, when we're watching and we're texting, we're like,
think about my family, for
Yeah.
example. The way I describe it is like you're just standing in life, you're standing in your power and you're doing great and someone comes in your back and stabs you. Like that's what it feels like watching that.
Yeah, she's like, think about my family. Everyone had to watch that, and it felt like a knife in the back. I don't know who she's saying stabbed her in the back. Was it Kwami or Micah or both?
Parents, like nobody was really prepared to see what they saw, especially people that didn't know, like all of them, like the world.
It almost felt like he had this Peter Pan syndrome where he didn't know how good it was in front of him. And he was kind of just reliving and revisiting these moments from the pod.
Peter Pan syndrome. So that's not an official term or concept in my field, I don't think. Maybe it's mentioned in the research literature at times. But the way that I understand people use it to mean is that when someone can't grow up, when they stay a child, they refuse to become an adult. And for example, you would have a 35-year-old man who still plays with toys and still lives with his parents and wants to hang out with other teenagers and plays video games and tries to talk and dress like a younger person, that kind of thing. I'm sure there are other sort of classic examples that we come up with. And so the interviewer is saying, we thought that Kwami was suffering from Peter Pan syndrome. And I don't, in the comments, can you tell me, maybe she'll clarify, but in the comments, tell me, what does she mean by that? Or does she just not understand, or do I not understand what Peter Pan syndrome refers to?
It felt like he had this Peter Pan syndrome where he didn't know how good it was in front of him. And he was kind of just reliving and revisiting these moments from the pods.
Maybe the mistake or how she's referring to it, whether it's a mistake or not, is that she is meaning that he's having a hard time moving forward, that he is living in the past. But again, that's not my sense of what Peter Pan, if you know the character, is someone that never grows old. So she is saying that we thought that he was having a hard time. He didn't realize what he had in front of him. Yeah, I think that perspective is often put forth something along those lines of just like he's stupid, or he doesn't know what he's doing, or he's lying, or he's a cheater, or he can't really see what's good in life. And that's one way to look at it. But I think another way to look at it is the way we've been talking about, and the way Chelsea frames it, of just like the format of the experiment is that you develop connections, and she even mentioned alcohol earlier. Also, even if he didn't really want to be with Chelsea, which at the wedding he did, but even if he was questioning it, from our perspective, I think from a lot of people's perspective, we would rather have Kwami be with Chelsea than with Micah. We don't know the real Chelsea. We don't know the real Micah, of course, but I think that was the prevailing sentiment. And so for us, we would say Kwami is being stupid or foolish or something by even flirting with Micah, even by talking to Micah in the pods. But we're not Kwami. We're not in his shoes. We don't know what he saw or experienced. And he might intellectually agree. He might be like, yeah, I mean, on paper, Chelsea is a much better person for me and better person for anyone, really. But I just wasn't really that attracted to Chelsea, or my attraction to Chelsea wasn't the same way as Micah or something. Who knows what was really in Kwami's heart.
Yeah, I don't know. There is something for some people where it's like you're loyal to that first person. Mm-hmm. You're loyal to that first person that you connected with. Mm. And Netflix Daddy, I don't know if you've heard of us refer to him. He said it's pretty unlikely that you're going to marry your number one person.
She said, Netflix Daddy? That couldn't be what she said. What did she say?
And Netflix Daddy, I don't know if you've heard of us.
Netflix Daddy. Netflix Daddy? Is that a past cast member who was trying to advise them? Like Cameron from season 1? Is that Matt Lachey or Lachey? Is that one of the psychologists that was there? Is it one of the producers? Probably one of the producers. Yeah, probably one of the producers.
He said it's pretty unlikely that you're going to marry your number one person.
It's pretty unlikely that you're going to marry your number one person. Okay. So maybe by experience, this Netflix daddy understood that and was trying to help people to, if things don't work out with the first person, give it a shot, because maybe other people will work out in a way that is maybe not expected. So, stay on the show and keep trying. And of course, if you're a producer, you can imagine that being an important idea to put out there. If it's true, and they're actually, the Netflix daddy is actually trying to help people, then okay. But you could also imagine that the producers would not really want to invest all this time, because it's a lot of investment of money to get these 30 people, to get them all there, and then if half of them leave because they have a frustration upon the first person that they like, then that's a loss of investment. So I'm sure they're interested in encouraging people to stay.
After days 1 and 2, in your mind.
Who is this Netflix daddy?
He is the creator of Love is Blind. He's
okay. So, yeah, okay, yeah.
Sorry, to break it to you guys, but it's pretty unlikely that you marry or will walk out of here engaged to your number one by day 2. It was shocking for all of us.
Okay, actually, the reunion is starting. So what do I do? Wait, I'll pause this. I'll pause Netflix, and I'm almost done, so I'll continue watching the interview.
Your connections with people evolve. Mm. And my connections evolved, and so did Kwami's. But I think that for some people, there is like that loyalty to that first person, right? And let's just talk about the male psyche for a moment, shall we?
Oh boy. Chelsea, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me.
Let's. Do men like rejection? Never.
Do women?
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't like rejection, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
And there is like that, I'm rejecting you, but like, oh, but pull me back, right? Like that push pull. And it is I feel like it is kind of a juvenile.
So I'm not very happy with this. It also might say something about the way Chelsea views Kwami. You could say the exact same thing about Micah. You could say the exact same thing about several of the people. What does gender have to do with it? Now, you can make an argument that in general, boys and girls are socialized differently. There are average differences. You can't put all men in one category and all women in one category. There's a huge overlap of the Venn diagram, but generally speaking, our boys socialize differently on average and our girls socialize differently in the United States and in other cultures. Yes, and can that result in different narratives, different approaches to emotion, different values, different ideas of what it is to be good, how to manage relationships? Yeah, and we see that played out in society all the time. So you can say that, and maybe that's what she's getting at, that men might have a harder time. I don't know. With rejection, it's such a fundamental pain and worry for people that I have never seen any differences among any gender regarding the intensity of the reactivity to rejection. I just haven't seen it. All types of behaviors and reactions and interpretations and narratives to rejection are available to all humans regardless of gender. So yeah, but I think what she's saying is that Kwami had a problem with rejection from Micah, which makes sense. And he, at the pool and maybe at Chelsea's birthday party, was still hurt by that and wanted some indication that Micah might still like him. And he didn't want to be with Micah, but he wanted some feeling of like, or the satisfaction of being able to maybe get Micah to admit that I don't know, something along those lines. I don't know if that's true. That's not one of the hypotheses that I would put out there. The main hypothesis that I had, the main hypothesis I had at the time, because of the way that Kwami presented on the show, because he was apparently very subdued in the way that he would express love towards Chelsea, because it was not very apparent, at least to me, that Kwami would, when you compare Brett and Kwami's behavior and statements and overt expressions of love to their fiancés, there was a vast difference between those two men. So I thought that his flirting with Micah indicated that he wasn't necessarily into Micah, but he didn't have enough loyalty to Chelsea because he didn't really want to be with Chelsea, and so he didn't really care about flirting with other people. That was my main hypothesis, but when they got married, I had to completely rethink all that, and the hypothesis that I landed on was that he just still had feelings for Micah, but he apparently was very much wanting to be with Chelsea. Or maybe he had temporary lapses or something, but it seems as though he wanted to be with Chelsea, he wanted to marry her, and he still had some feelings. He still had a connection with Micah, and with a couple drinks, he acted on it, and then maybe, hopefully, later regretted it.
It is I feel like it is kind of a juvenile male behavior. You have to be able to stop it in its tracks.
Yeah, and then even framing it that way, that she's essentially saying that Kwami is a juvenile, typical male, and that men are typically juvenile. I don't know. I don't want to accuse Chelsea, but it does kind of fit with some of her attitude towards Kwami. I, of course, can't know that, but there were certain indications of something going on there. And I don't know if she came up with this herself or she's in some sort of echo chamber. Certainly in our society, there's a lot of propaganda and misinformation around gender and around what is typically male and typically female. And when we look at it with science, we find that the vast, vast majority of the claims that are made in culture are not borne out in the data. So they are just stories we tell ourselves there's lots of reasons as to why we tell ourselves stories about gender. But so I don't know, but I'm not as you know, anytime anyone says, well, women, well, men, I'm always like, oh God. And this is no different from that.
Pull me back, right? Like that push pull. And it is I feel like it is kind of a juvenile male behavior. You have to be able to stop it in its tracks because it's lying to you.
Yeah.
Now, she could say it's juvenile behavior, it's immature behavior. Why is it juvenile male behavior? What if a woman did that? Is it juvenile woman behavior, or is it just, is it framed somehow differently? And why would it be? You could say it's juvenile. You could say it's short-sighted. You could say it's immature. Sure, because you could make an argument there. And what do we mean by immaturity? What do we mean by juvenile? You know, we could say that younger people tend not to have the ability to think long-term or to recognize the impact of their actions. They haven't learned from experience. They haven't stepped into adult responsibility yet. Their prefrontal cortex hasn't fully developed. So you could say that immaturity and being a juvenile, being a younger person, a minor or a teenager, could be a factor in that. But why juvenile male?
It's not real,
Right.
right? And I think he had to realize that. That I think in some ways, Micah and their situation and the relationship they had was kind of what he wanted to hear, but I was really what he needed to hear.
I think what she's saying is that Kwami really needed to hear that from Micah. Like he wanted some indication that she liked him, which you could imagine, and that it is a common thing. You know, when I talk about ethically breaking up with someone, if you ever break up with someone, but if this is the truth and you feel comfortable saying it, it can be very helpful to the person you're breaking up with by telling them things like this, by saying, look, the love that I had for you was real, or the like that I had for you was very real. It wasn't fake, but at some point I didn't feel those feelings anymore. And it was around this time, I don't know why it happened, but I wasn't lying to you the entire time. I wasn't deceiving you. You weren't deceiving yourself. The relationship was real, and I was 100% in it. And then at a certain point, something changed. And so for Kwami, he never got that from Micah, so he was trying to get that from her as a way of having some closure or some reassurance or trying to gain trust in humanity again or something. I think that's what she's saying.
Micah and their situation and the relationship they had was kind of what he wanted to hear, but I was really what he needed to hear.
Right. I think that's what she's saying. And she's saying that he ultimately didn't really want to be with Micah. He was just wanting some reassurance. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to end this episode here and tune in next time when I actually watch the reunion. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.